Hello everyone, welcome back to another remote sensing lecture video. And in this lecture video, what I would like to do is I'd like to go through an example of executing an unsupervised classification in ArcGIS Pro. And so what I've done is I have an NAIP image here, so this is the 1 meter spatial resolution of a portion of Long Island. And before we do anything, I want to sort of talk about what classes we would hope to get out in terms of surface features. I think meaningful surface features would be water, forested area. Hopefully we can get manicured vegetation, urban areas. This sort of floodplain, inundated marsh area here. And then again, these houses all through here would be grouped in with the urban. So water, beach, forest, manicured meadow, urban, and the inundated marsh. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to identify 6 different classes in this image. So as with all good unsupervised classifications, it's always best practice to start with more classes than you think you need and merge them down as necessary. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to start with 15, and we're going to merge them down and see where we end up. What I've also done is just to sort of investigate a little bit is, are we able to differentiate between them in the visible and then just quickly in a false color composite? I think our classes are reasonable. We might have a little bit of issue separating between water and this inundated marsh, but hopefully we'll be able to deal with that. So anyway, let's go ahead and do our classification. So since these are the same image, they're just different band assignments, which again does not change data value. We can pick either one. So I'm going to go with the one that I already have highlighted here. And to run an unsupervised classification, you go up to Imagery, Classification Tools, and then Classify. So we're going to run IsoCluster. IsoCluster is basically a different algorithm, but it does the same sort of thing as k-means. So our maximum number of classes, I said I was going to run 12. Minimum number of samples, I think 20 should be fine. I'm going to keep everything else default. I'm going to click Run. Okay, so it looks like we might have actually gotten most of our classes. So we have 12 clusters that we have to deal with over here. So let's go ahead and start with the most obvious one, which is going to be water. Now, the way that I always approach these is I tend to color everything that we know what it is, the color of the class that we're assuming. So I'm going to turn off that one, and I'm going to go to Map. View. And we're going to sort of pan around here. I'm going to be flipping the image on and off. So I think our pink is going to be water. So I'm going to make this blue for water. Okay. And then this other class, the 7 here, this is our manicured grass, which is kind of a paley green yellow. So I'm going to make class 7 a sort of paley green yellow, something maybe like that. Or was that class 3? If you're ever confused about what class you're looking at, if you just click on the image, you'll see that it pops up with class 5. So that was class 5. So we need to make class 5 that sort of paley yellow. There we go. Which means class 7 we should change to something different so we don't get confused. Okay. So what else have we got? Well, it looks like we have this pinkish color here. Might be water, but it's also occurring out here in our marshy area. So if anything, I would actually say what we've managed to do is this is a good example of one of those ideas where we need to sort of reconceive our idea of what surface features we actually have. And I would actually say that our class 1 here, this is actually probably something more indicative of maybe shallow water. So I'm going to make it sort of a bluish brown, something like that. All right, so it's more of a shallow water. Okay. Let's see. This black is definitely, I would say, our marsh class. And that black is 11. Our marsh class, which if we look at it, it's kind of like a brownish color. Maybe something like that. Sure. And then I would say we have the dark green as well, is the same sort of marsh color. So that would be 4. So 4 is also going to be that same marshy color as 11. It's dark olivenite, and then we're going to make 11 also be dark olivenite. Okay. So we're already starting to make progress. I think we can safely say that 2 is our beach. So we can change that to be maybe a sort of Sahara sand. Sure, that makes sense. Okay, so how are we, just take a step back and look at how are we doing so far. Well, we've got our water. We've got our manicured vegetation came out. We've got our what we would have called our inundated meadow. Let's take a look at our urban. So our urban seems to have clearly come out in this sort of yellowish color here, which we have as being class 10. I personally like to make my urban more of a sort of dark gray to represent concrete. So one thing I'm noticing is that we have the stripes of the image down here especially are being picked up as our inundated marsh. And again, this comes back to that question of what do we do with it? And in this particular instance, given that, I would say that we would most likely be best off to just sort of accept the error at that point. I think we're asking a little too much out of the system. Okay, so there's that. So let's see. Done, done, done. What is class 3? Another trick I like to do is if I see a class and I don't know what it is, I like to make it a bright red and see where the bright red shows up. Or a black or something, some other color that is not being used. And just see where it shows up. Okay, so it's showing up in sort of showing up in the shadows of a lot of places. And actually that's something else I've noticed too here, is that one of our classes that we call the sort of inundated marsh is also procking and going off with the shadows. So that, you can see we have all the tree shadows here. So actually what I might do is I might actually change class 4 to be shadow. Again, I'm reconceiving what our surface features are. That's not really going to be, it's not really a class, right? Shadows aren't a surface feature, but we have to sort of account for the fact that they exist. Now, what you could do if you wanted to, and actually I might do this, is I might say, okay, the shadows are occurring primarily in vegetation, right? They're occurring, actually let's make 3 red again so that we're not being confused. Make 3 bright red. Or sorry, 3 was our shadows. Make 3 bright red. Or make 3 black. Make 4 bright red. Oh, maybe these are both shadows actually. And again, you can see sort of I'm thinking out loud here. This is what goes into interpreting. So it looks like we actually have 2 classes that got picked up as shadow. Class 3 and class 4 seem to be picking up the shadow. But what I was getting at before is if you look at where the shadows are, right, they're mostly along vegetation, right? So I would actually say that we could combine 3 and 4 into vegetation, which I'm going to make leaf green. So these would be our forested vegetation. I would also say, while we're zoomed in like this, that class 8 would also be leaf green. And also class 6 would be leaf green as well. So let's zoom out. How are we looking so far? We've got our water, we've got our inundated marsh, we've got our manicured vegetation, our urban, and our sand. So I think we've hit all the classes. Now all we have to do is figure out our two remaining clusters, which are 7 and 9. Let's see what is under here. If we turn that off and we zoom in, in this case, I would say that we would be able to call 7 also vegetation. But let's just take a look at some of the other places that 7's occurring. Oh man, you would have hoped that this would have come up as manicured vegetation, but it didn't. Okay. So now I'm sort of second guessing that maybe we shouldn't be having, again, I'm reconceptualizing our idea of what vegetation is. And I'm thinking maybe we should roll 5 into vegetation as well. And then also 7 and 8. Right, and if we do that, I think we have a lot better results. So you can see here that what I ended up having to do was really pare down my expectations. Now, what I will also say is this. I think part of what we saw was the fact that this image only had 4 bands. So we had a lot less spectral resolution to work with in terms of differentiating between different features. And so we weren't really able to differentiate between the manicured and the forested vegetation that well. But you can see that we were able to pick out urban, water, and vegetation really well because they're very spectrally distinct. But you can see that the highway and the beach had a little bit of issue. So this might be an area where we might want to go back in and bust. But again, that's outside of the realm of this discussion. So hopefully the sort of ideas that I talked about, hopefully this makes sense. And as always, please reach out.